Will Joe Biden bring back $2,000 stimulus checks? Hey everyone, me Kevin here. In this video, I'm going to break down my thoughts on whether or not I think there will be a third stimulus check and will it be close to $2,000. These thoughts are going to be based on everything that I've collected from Mitch McConnell, Joe Biden, and other politicians over the last few months. We're specifically going to take a look at parts of Joe Biden's plans that he's already expected to introduce at the end of January and what amount of stimulus checks we might expect. Keep in mind that the staff of Bernie Sanders has told us we should not expect a bill to be introduced to Congress for anything until January 20th. Once January 20th comes around, we might actually see some new bills hit Congress. And the biggest one we're expecting? The next stimulus package. See, there is already a clear need in Congress for a third large stimulus package, and they each have different reasons for this. The most basic reasons are simple. We're in a pandemic. Mobility data has slowed so far this winter. JP Morgan believes we're going to see a recession in the first quarter of 2021. And there are expectations that we're not comfortable with the ramping up of the COVID vaccines yet, that we need to spend more money to get this ramp up going faster, to get the people who want to be vaccinated faster. But instead of focusing on some of these things, let's right now focus on what the Republicans and Democrats bring to the table. What do they say that their plans are to negotiate for and stand for in the new sessions of Congress? Well, Mitch McConnell already gave us some insight. Mitch McConnell stated that Congress will come back in January to discuss the next stimulus package, which will include liability protections for corporations and other business support. Now, of course, we did just pass a stimulus package. We passed a stimulus package that includes a second round of PPP funding, $600 stimulus checks, rental relief, and a lot of these programs we still don't even have answers for yet. For example, there's a Save Our Stages provision, and the SBA still hasn't provided guidance on that. But Mitch McConnell has already stated that Congress plans to come back to negotiate the next stimulus package, which would include liability protections for businesses and more business aid in January. But there's more than this. Because see, Joe Biden also said that Congress will come back at the end of January and there will be a very large stimulus package. Joe Biden specifically said that his package would include $1,200 stimulus checks. He mentioned that he supports the HEROES Act, which is a model that he supports, which is $1,200 stimulus checks for adult filers, $500 to dependents of all ages. That would mean adult dependents. College students get $500 as well as adult dependents. They would get $500. And after all, we've heard him many times say that he believes the $600 tiny check plan is just a, quote, down payment on the next stimulus package. And when he's asked if he actually thinks he can get something like this done, he says, quote, I think we can get it done. Now, we'll talk more about $2,000 checks in a moment, but let's keep going with what Joe Biden says and why Joe Biden has this confidence. See, Joe Biden is confident that we're going to get or see another stimulus package because he says we have to. He says if we don't, we'll be in dire economic circumstances if we don't do another package in January. Those are his words. He says we need another package and that the package will include at least 3 priorities. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, could I bug you to check out the amazing courses linked down below on building your wealth with real estate or stocks? There's a holiday coupon code down there that does expire on January 8th. I've set an expiration date for this, so on January 8th, the holiday code will be over. So take advantage of that. You can bundle up on the website as well. You get a big fat discount if you bundle up. You'll see those linked down below, but just make sure to put that holiday coupon code in there. It's linked down below. Thanks so much. Number 1, controlling the pandemic. Biden believes that controlling the pandemic is not just a matter of flipping a switch. That's too easy. He says it's going to take time to get the engine of the government working the way Joe Biden wants it to work when he gets into office. He's trying to make those changes now, but he says he doesn't have access to the proper departments to be able to begin that transition yet. This is obviously because we still know, I mean, at this point, I don't want to not mention this. Obviously, Donald Trump still has very large and ambitious claims to maintain his control of the presidency, to stay as president of the United States and claim victory in the 2020 election. I'm going to put that aside in this video. We can talk about that in other videos. So if Donald Trump gets in, I'll have to make a new video. But for right now, let's keep moving forward with what we know about Joe Biden and future stimulus. Joe Biden says that controlling the pandemic to him is the #1 priority. And when it comes to mask mandates, he has gone as far as saying that he will require masks on planes, trains, any kind of interstate commerce for federal workers. But there are many places he can't require masks, and instead he will just urge people to wear masks and do their part, he says. The second thing Biden wants to do is revive the economy. He sees stimulus as necessary for doing this. The $600 checks we got, he knows this. It's just a little bit of relief. It's not stimulating to the economy, but $1,200 might be, Joe Biden says. Number 3, Joe Biden says we need to build back better. This is obviously a reference to spending large on infrastructure. Streets, roads, bridges, hospitals, schools, and especially green infrastructure. Now, that is a political hot button here, but we know that Joe Biden, and hey, by the way, if you want, leave a comment down below. Let me know if you want me to do a breakdown of Joe Biden's New Deal plan. Now, they say that's different from the Green New Deal, so maybe we'll have to do a comparison on that. But I know this is a political hot button, so let me know if anybody even has interest in that. But anyway, we know that Joe Biden has specifically referenced incentivizing solar, green energy, 500,000 EV charging stations to come, and much more. A huge push for green energy. Reporters have also asked Joe Biden if he's already talked to McConnell about these things. Now, because, generally when we hear that Democrats have priorities, we just kind of picture Mitch McConnell's face coming up with a scythe in his hand because he's the Grim Reaper. He is where bills go to die. And when bills get sent over to Mitch McConnell, well, Mitch McConnell tends to do nothing. And this is why we generally associate Congress as getting very little done. Because generally, when there are Republican priorities, the Democrats block it. And when there are Democratic priorities, which stimulus is one of, Republicans tend to block it. That just tends to be the way around Congress. That's why it took us 9 months to see another stimulus package. Now, we know something about Biden and McConnell, though. And we'll talk about Georgia in a moment, because I know that's going to come up. But something that we do know about Biden and McConnell is that they used to be, it might still very well be, friends. McConnell was the only Republican senator to show up at Joe Biden's funeral. McConnell and Biden have a history of bipartisan deals as well. Biden believes that even if Republicans maintain control of the Senate here on January 5th, he will be able to forge compromise and actually get Congress working again. Biden, having served in the Senate for 46 years, says he knows how to negotiate a deal in this place and recognizes that we can't have everything in a deal, but we can have a lot, he says. And when he was specifically asked, does your plan include $1,200 stimulus checks? He said yes, it does. He also implied that he's had multiple conversations with Pelosi and McConnell throughout the $600 check negotiation, which he has claimed to be a down payment. He subtly suggests that he had a lot to do with the fact that this $600 stimulus check even got passed. The fact that after 9 months, all of a sudden after the election, Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell start seeing eye to eye again. Now, obviously, we had a little bit of wrench thrown into the gears with the $2,000 stimulus checks that didn't get by Mitch McConnell, but did get by Pelosi. But again, we'll bring up the $2,000 checks in a moment. Regarding the $1,200 checks, though, and the $600 tiny check package, even though Joe Biden has been very silent publicly, he seems to be subtly claiming credit in the background. And Joe Biden is, well, expected to do more in Congress than Donald Trump has. And that's not a slam at Donald Trump, it's just a suggestion of style. Joe Biden expects to be more involved in congressional negotiations directly. That is, Joe Biden will get on the phone with Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi. Trump, on the other hand, has more delegated this role to other people like Mark Meadows, his chief of staff, or the Treasury Secretary, Mr. Steve Mnuchin. Now, also, even after passing the $600 stimulus check package, even McConnell has already indicated his interest in getting a new stimulus deal put together. McConnell's priority, though, liability protections and more small business support. Democrats have a priority of providing aid to state and local governments. These two issues combined with Biden's plan could lead to a larger actual stimulus package coming. And again, heck, we're still working through this current stimulus package, so yeah, why are we already talking about the next one? The reality is we got to talk about both. We're waiting for that rental relief and the Save Our Stages information, the PPP information, the idle grants. Are they going to be 1K or 10K? What's it going to be? We've got a lot to wait on, and nobody likes waiting. But in the meantime, we can talk about this big package that we expect to come at the end of January. Now, In order to keep talking about this, though, we should clear up the $2,000 stimulus checks. The editorial boards of both the Washington Post and Bloomberg also came out with this. But just so you know, an editorial board is sort of a group of professional staff writers at like the New York Times or Bloomberg or the Washington Post or whatever. So these aren't like op-ed pieces. They're just sort of I guess they're kind of like opinion pieces because they're the opinion of the paper, which is different from like when Mitch McConnell writes an op-ed piece or whatever in the Wall Street Journal. That's obviously Mitch McConnell's opinion. This is an opinion that is reflective of what the entire paper is supposed to think, what all of the journalists are supposed to be on board with at that company. Whether or not they are, it's kind of the way editorial boards present information when an editorial board says something. It's a big deal. Anyway, the fact that we got both the Washington Post and Bloomberg bagging on the $2,000 stimulus checks as being too untargeted and being a mistake and leading to too much spending. After all, remember, the Cash Act would have provided $2,000 checks to adults, $2,000 to dependents, and $2,000 to adult dependents. It cost almost $500 billion, $464 billion. Now, of course, we have Democrats that say they're in favor of this and Republicans that say, no, that's too much money. But the fact that we have editorial boards against that, big issue. And the reason there's a big issue regarding those $2,000 stimulus checks is actually quite simple. And what I did is I just put together a potential solution, and then we'll talk about next steps here. So first, this is who gets or how much money somebody gets on the $2,000 Cash Act. So if we're thinking, is the $2,000 Cash Act going to come back? Maybe, but it's probably not going to come back in this form, because the reality here is somebody making $350,000 as a couple with 4 children would still get $2,000 in stimulus money. If I drop this to 2 children, this will obviously drop. Somebody making $350,000 would not get that. But a couple, husband-wife or wife-wife, husband-husband, whatever, a couple making $250,000 with 2 children would still get $3,000 in stimulus. And this is very politically unpopular. That's because the phase-out limit at $150,000 only trickles down by about $5 per every $100 you make over this. And I think this is why the $2,000 check bill, or at least one of the reasons in terms of why it died. So I came up with a solution. My solution is simple. Increase the phase-out to $15. So for every $100 you make more than the limit as a couple of $150,000 or as a single person $75,000, you lose $15 of a larger, potentially $2,000 stimulus check. Well, in this case, a couple making $225,000 with 4 children and 2 adults, they get $750, which means that is almost completely phased out by $225,000, the stimulus money that they would get. Because otherwise, if somebody was making, let's say, $125,000 and they had 4 children and they were a couple, they would actually get, let's delete this here for a second, they would actually get $12,000. So this makes sense. This kind of phase-out method would work. It would potentially be a lot more politically appetizing to say that, hey, you know, if a couple's making $225,000, they only get $750 in stimulus with 4 children. Okay, well, that's doable. We could still do the $2,000 stimulus checks. It's a simple solution. Unfortunately, Congress just, either they weren't bright enough to think about it or whatever, they don't seem to think about solutions like changing the formula to make it a little bit easier or to make it more palpable for people to get $2,000 stimulus checks. With the revision I just proposed, it's again my example here, it would be very easy for anyone making under $150,000 as a couple or anyone making under $75,000 as a single person to easily get $2,000 checks for themselves, $2,000 for their children, and $2,000 for their adult dependents. And then you start losing it pretty quickly after that number. But because simple spreadsheets like this or flowcharts seem to be too complicated for Congress, in my estimation, it's much more likely that Joe Biden is going to stick with his original plan. An extra $1,200. Now, keep this in mind. When we hear $1,200, it's like, wait a minute, that's way smaller than $2,000. But wait a minute. The $2,000 stimulus check bill would have amended the $600 checks to $2,000, which means you would have gotten an extra $1,400 stimulus check. If Joe Biden says, hey, forget about amending the old plan, let's just do another round of $1,200 stimulus checks with the same phase-outs as last time, that's actually only $200 less than $2,000 because you would get $600 and $1,200 checks. This, I think, would be much more likely to pass with Joe Biden's side and Mitch McConnell's side. I think we can get Mitch McConnell to support $1,200 checks again. See, $1,200 checks phase out completely with the current rules at a couple making $198,000 or a single person making $98,000. This seems much more public, or like I should say the optics of that seem much more fair. Politically, this has already been done as well, so it's hard to say as a Republican or Democrat, no, that's a terrible formula or whatever. Well, no, it's not, because you passed that in the CARES Act. It worked then, and it's the same amount. So it's not like we're going to $2,000 and it messes up the formula at all. Now, the $600 tiny checks, we already know this was seen as like a minor amount of relief. It wasn't really stimulus. However, Joe Biden wants stimulus, and the $1,200 is something he wants as part of it. And look, I haven't even mentioned the Georgia runoff election. So let's touch on that. See, on January 5th, we have an election of 2 senators in Georgia. If Republicans win just 1 seat, they will retain control of the Senate. Many see Republicans retaining control as the death of any future stimulus package. But I disagree with that. And that's why for the vast majority of the first part of this video, I've been talking about how we can actually achieve stimulus checks without mentioning Republicans not being in control, aka with Joe Biden and Mitch McConnell. I believe what I just described is entirely possible. Now, of course, this doesn't mean we should hold our breath, but let's go through the scenarios. If Democrats win, yeah, we'll probably slam dunk Biden's extra $1,200 stimulus checks. That's $1,800, right? If we include the $600. Now, if Democrats win, I don't think we'll see monthly recurring checks. Maybe they'll go up to the $2,000, though I don't know if they're going to stretch that as much. I think we'd be much more likely to see the $1,200, which again, that'd be $1,800 combined with the $600, and we'll be able to see potentially some Democratic stimulus priorities like student loan forgiveness or other benefits like this. Now, keep in mind that with 50 votes in the Senate and Kamala Harris as a tiebreaker as the 51st vote, Democrats don't have the ultimate or unlimited power. Most bills are still going to require 60 votes to pass. So it's not like Joe Biden can just burn Mitch McConnell. He's still going to need Mitch McConnell to be able to function for the rest of the year. Now, they can do sneaky things like pass things through budget reconciliation packages with 51 votes. There are many tricks up their sleeves, but they're not going to have endless control. They're still going to need Republicans. They're still going to need that bipartisan support. And this is why I think there's a greater chance that rather than burning that bridge, Democrats under Biden would probably be likely to stick to that $1,200, which again is $1,800 as opposed to $2,000. Personally, if Democrats win, I think we have an 85% chance of seeing another $1,200 check. We'll see. It could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty optimistic on that. If Democrats lose, probably down to about a 55% chance, which is actually not horrible. It's slightly more than half. So either way, I think there's a shot we have at another $1,200 round on top of the $600. Unfortunately, the $2,000 requires a formula change. And you go talking to Congress about formulas, and boy, you have lost them. You just lose them. So that is my point of view on how big the next stimulus check will be. If you found this interesting, consider sharing this with somebody you care about. Consider subscribing. And folks, we'll see you in the next video.